In the last week, I have been asked two major questions, one of which is why did I shave? I have no idea. I feel like an absolute baby and I regret it. But the second, and probably the reason why you are here, is what do I think of the new Siege meta that's going around? Should I invest in Siege? Are they any good? Etc. etc. So we're going to hop in and figure out a little bit more about that and what I think about it today. We're going to go over a few things like pros and cons. We're also going to be comparing it to other styles of fighting in the game. We're also going to go over some players who I think might be interested in Siege and what should you be looking for if you are going to invest in Siege in the future. And then lastly, will I invest in the Siege and what do I think its lasting impact will be on the game? And because I know that you don't want to stare at my face and at these big ol' 1000 commanders all video, we're going to hop over to a presentation style format so that this is easier to explain. So first up, we have the pros and cons. And so we're going to dive right into the pros. And funny enough, there are actually a good amount of pros. So your first pro is that it is a very cheap investment in order to get to relevancy. So you can get up to about 5511 on both your marches or both your commanders, and they will actually perform pretty well in the field. You will actually likely trade the best out of all your marches, especially when they're expertise, in your entire murder ball. So in even murder ball scenarios, right, when you are fighting, they're not pushing you, you're not pushing them, and your turret is just in the back doing whatever it wants, it's going to trade really, really well. I will also say that range combats for bridge and mountain fighting is super impactful. So you will really annoy enemies who cannot reach you, and you will pretty much have no downside to just setting up your turret and going to town. In fact, it is so overpowered that you will likely be able to use this on farms with zero tech and still have an impact on the field. Now, it's going to cost you a lot of resources because those farms are not actually going to have a lot of KVK tech, but you can still use them at the very least. It's also going to require a little bit of attention, but like I said, if you're using this on a farm, you're already just kind of throwing it out to the wind. It's just going to have minimal impact, but more so than throwing maybe a epic Sun Tzu out there and just throwing it into a murder ball and draining your own resources. And then lastly, it actually requires the least amount of skill and attention to play. So if you don't really care about your marches, right, and you are focusing on war coordination or territory building or flag building, whatever it is, this is really nice for an officer or a rank 5 to just go ahead and plop down a turret and really not pay much attention so that they can put their attention elsewhere. I will also say that the lag doesn't affect the ability to trade well. A lot of times in your murder balls, you get hit with a ton of lag. Well, siege marches don't really care about lag because they're just going to auto fire into the murder ball. And lastly, that auto fire, that auto targeting, if you are, let's say, a lower skilled player, or if you do not know how to target well, or you can't click on targets that easily on your phone, then this is just really, really nice. It is just auto targeting and you don't have to worry about who you're hitting. Now for the cons. Well, remember that last pro that I said? Well, now it's a con. So it requires the least amount of skill and attention to play. This reminds me of an auto battler. An auto battler is not the direction I think the game should be going in. I think that it is removing choice from the user to interact with other players on a skillful level. So this is the exact same reason that I'm not a big fan of the auto engage function that Lilith is going to be releasing into the game soon. I think it's a bad solution to a larger issue that the game has, which is actually the game lag and player functionability. The UI of the open field design, the targeting, the lag, all this stuff are major problems that Lilith needs to fix, and auto targeting, in my opinion, is not the solution. It takes away skillful aspects of the game, it takes away the human aspect of the game, and funny enough, I actually went and looked up a video, or not a video, but a Google search of an auto battler just to like remind myself what they were, and the first thing that I saw was this Reddit post, right? That, I mean, I'm not saying you should go to Reddit for any accurate information, but it says, what is the best auto battler or low effort game, right? Funny enough, I don't think Rock should be a low effort game. When I think of KVK, I'm thinking of conscious decisions, open field fighting, in the moment decision making from your leadership, and really like the skill that it takes to operate a functional murder ball. Yes, this game is obviously pay to win. Yes, the more money you spend, the less skill you need, but there is a skillful aspect to open field fighting, which is why there are so many guides out there and so many people are interested on how to fight well. So I really don't think the auto battler genre needs to flood its way into Rise of Kingdoms. The next reason why it's a big con is the investment sabotage, right? So your armament investment and gear investment, maybe not if you only craft epic gear, but at least your armament investment will be completely put on hold while you invest into your siege march. And not only that, but you can still get archer, infantry, and cav stats on your siege V formation, and it'll basically make all those armament crates that you're opening completely useless where they could have been useful on your other marches. One of the biggest downsides for me personally, and this is one of the parts where you'll start to see in the video where my disdain for siege really comes to light, but you are unable to aggressively push objectives. What does this mean? Well, you have very little mobility. The setup time and the takedown time for siege is just too long. If it was 3 seconds, it would still be too long. I know that they reduced it from 10 seconds. I think it's now 6 and 8, but that being said, it just lacks mobility to push an objective. It can't swarm a structure, right? So I'm a big whale, right? You gotta go ahead and right click on the flag and swarm. Well, flags are not attackable by ranged marches. And lastly, you can't position on enemy territory. So again, when you're pushing objectives, you cannot actually park your siege in enemy territory to hold that field, because as soon as you retreat or leave from that field, your march is going to get absolutely crushed while it's taking down from its siege tower mode, and it's not going to go well, right? It lacks way too much mobility, and you're unable to push with your murder ball as well because of its setup and takedown timer. I will also say that another con is you're not able to use a siege march at all, period, end of story, if you are losing too hard, right? If they are swarming over your territory, you can't get out of the field, you can't get out of your city at all, then a siege march is completely useless. You're just going to be throwing it into the dust and it's going to be getting crushed. And then the last con that I have is actually a win more march. And why is this a con? Well, marches that just have it so that when you put them on the field, you win more are not actually benefiting or contributing to your kingdom to take the objective or win in general, right? A win more march is something that if you are already winning an open field fight, it will perform very, very well. And moving on to our next topic, we have the comparisons to other type of fighting. So oddly enough, when I think about a siege march, especially in 2024, and how it operates on the field and its significance to the field presence and the KVK outcome as a whole, I actually compare it heavily to cheeseburgering. So it is the opposite scenario, but the same function. And what do I mean by this? Well, given certain scenarios, it actually has the ability to trade super, super well. But it will not provide you a significant influence to positioning, KVK wins or losses, or anything besides simply draining your opponent. I don't believe that you can be aggressive with siege marches. I don't believe that you can be super defensive with siege marches, right? But at the same time, cheeseburgering, you can't be super aggressive with one march. You can't be even super defensive with one march, but you can trade very, very well if they're on your territory and be annoying and drain your opponent. That is the same thing that you can do with siege marches. You can put them on the field in a scenario where they trade really, really well, where you're winning more, or it's over a bridge or it's over a pass, and you can drain your opponent. And that is simply its only function. So if you are investing into siege marches, then you should also be a real big fan of cheeseburgering. And I'm not saying that anything involving cheeseburgering is bad. In fact, I cheeseburger my ass off. I think it's super, super relevant in KVKs nowadays, because you do have to be annoying when they're pushing onto your territory. But at the same time, I think being defensive in that regard is doing more for your kingdom than just winning more. Additionally, I would never invest in a commander just to cheeseburger. So now, what kind of player do I think should be looking to invest in the siege? Well, I think that if you are not a frontliner, I think this is a good option for you. It is something that you can sit in the back, not really contribute to your position, but you can still trade well, okay? If you are a low spender and you're aiming to increase your total kill points, I think this is a good way for you to trade better than you ever have, maybe contribute to your kingdom more if you aren't able to really reliably field function, or field fight, I should say, and function in the field. And this kind of goes and weaves into my next point, which is mobile players, right? I think that Siege have a really big attraction to mobile players because it is so much harder to fight in the open field on mobile than it is on the computer. And I think that due to poor UI and lag issues on the phone and crashing issues, right, it is just miserable sometimes to fight in the open field. So if that is the kind of player that you are, then you can consider going into a ranged march. Now, our last point that I'm going to go over is, will I invest in the Siege, and what do I think is the impact of Siege going forward on Rise of Kingdoms? Well, just from me personally, I will never invest in the Siege. Ever. It doesn't matter if it trades 100,000 to 1, I will never ever invest. And that is just simply because I am a big advocate for interactive fighting in the open field. One of the things that really attracted me to this game in general is the freedom of motion, the freedom of choice of who you target, and all the goodness that comes in regular open field battles. I think the more things that they take away from us as players, the worse this game will be. Imagine a KVK where you never have to target a single march in the open field. You just send your marches straight and you send your marches home when they die, right? Like, there is nothing fun about that. The gameplay itself between siege marches and between the auto engage function that Lilith might be releasing soon here in the future just makes the interactivity of the game go down a ton. I don't want to support that kind of gameplay. I don't even find that gameplay fun. I don't find that gameplay fun to play against either. It is just not something that I think the game should be going in that kind of direction. And if it ever does get too far into that direction, well, then I will just simply no longer play the game. So that is one of the biggest reasons. Another reason, well, I can't swarm stuff. And as a rally and garrison leader as well, I mean, there is no way that I could invest into siege marches, put gold heads into siege marches, and then also go ahead and invest the 1,400 gold heads I need into every infantry garrison cycle. It's just not possible. Now, one of your questions might be, well, Kane, what if you run the 2-2-2-1 setup, right? 2 archers, 2 calves, 2 infantry, 1 siege. Well, I still would then have to be paying attention to my siege in the back line, and also, I just wouldn't have 7 marches on the front line, and that is an issue for me, right? So refer to the first point that I made. I just need to be on the front lines and in the field. So what are my real conclusions about Siege, and how do I feel about it? So I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I think content creators out there that are supporting this are doing a great job. They are, in essence, bringing to light something that could ruin the game, right? But at the same time, they are finding joy out of it, and it is appealing to a certain niche of the population, and I think that that in general is a good thing. I do think that we as a community and as players need to be cautious about where this is taking the game and how we really think that range combat should work in the future, because me personally, I think the range system as it stands now is awful, even if it trades really well. I think that interactivity in the field is super important and vital to this game's survivability and longevity, and I think it needs to stay that way. I also will not fault you for investing into range in the future. I think that if you are truly somebody who likes to step back in the field, likes to not be on the front lines, likes to just trade well, drain your opponent, well, then you could think about investing into siege. I don't think that that is a non-viable option. I will just say that the type of player that I am and the type of player that I look for when I'm doing recruiting and stuff is not the kind of player that's going to sit in the back lines and not engage and not push objectives. I think that generally most people should be looking to be moving with their marches, being able to make split-second decisions, and not having to wait 6 to 8 seconds to start moving any march at any given point. So I do want to also point out that there is a chance that bringing your siege march does indeed benefit your murder ball as a whole. I'm not saying that trading well does not increase the odds that your murder ball wins its brawl. I think that if you have better gear, you're trading well overall, you will in general win the fight. However, everyone knows, at least the war leaders of your kingdom know, that in order to win KVKs, you need to push objectives. You need to push through the enemy lines, get behind them, make them afraid, make them scatter, and so you can actually control pinch points on the map. That is how KVKs are won, and siege marches just cannot do that, which is why I think that it is not a viable investment strategy or open field strategy going forward. Also, who wants to play a KVK where it's just 20,000 range towers on one side and 20,000 range towers on the other side, and anytime you walk anywhere close to any sort of building or city, you just get completely melted and deleted? It's just not fun gameplay that I see in the future for Rise of Kingdoms. All that being said, I think that the siege meta should change. I don't think it's bad for the individual player, but on the game sense, I think that we really should not be supporting this game design from Lilith in May of 2024. So, what are your guys' thoughts? I think part of me feels a little bit bad because it feels like I'm coming across as like an elitist type attitude, and that's really not what I'm trying to convey. I'm not saying that Lilith can't cater to its casual audience because I think that the casual audience makes up the vast majority of this game. I just think that in the way that they're doing it is a band-aid solution to a larger problem, which is just the poor UI and combat design as well as the lag. I also think that the way that they're going about the auto battler introduction into this game is not entirely correct. I think that they could shift it away from commander investments so that you don't have to ruin your armaments, you don't have to ruin your gold head investments, you don't have to stay away from your rally or garrison archetypes, and instead you just continue to focus on these crusader flags. Like, what if there was a mechanic, maybe it was a default mechanic, but you could fill your flag up with 100% siege and it would fire turrets or arrows or whatever it is at nearby marches. It only caused slightly wounded units. So imagine if this wasn't attackable, there was no connecting flag that was touching this, but it had a range of maybe 1 or 2 flags so that it could protect this flag, right? Let's say that there was a flag over here and just fire non-lethal weaponry, but at the same time weaken something like a rally or weaken something like a open field march that's standing by just a little bit. Again, not sev wounds, but just slightly wounded like it was originally introduced to the game. I think it would have a small but actually kind of impactful presence on the field because weaker and smaller marches do actually do less damage, so it would still be doing something in the game. And again, that's just me spitballing on the fly, but you can see how I think that this could be introduced elsewhere and still be beneficial into the game. Alright guys, I have rambled long enough. I thought I did a conclusion of this video like at the 14-minute mark, and here we are now at what, almost the 17-minute mark. So we're just gonna wrap this up, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Are you investing in the siege? Do you agree with my analysis? Do you think that the game is headed into a healthy spot? Do you like the auto battler type siege formation? So just give me all the feedback. I want to hear it all because maybe I'm a little out of touch with the community, because it seems like siege are blowing up right now, but I really just don't see the appeal. So anyway, guys, I'll talk to you guys again soon. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.